Scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the Grey Cups won. Go Argos, go, go, go! Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go! Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe. Scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the cup. Pull together till the Grey Cups won. Go Argos, go Toronto, go. Go Argos, go, go, go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 8. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 8 of the Argo Bounce Live audio show, a weekly show devoted to the CFL's 18-time Grey Cup champion, Toronto Argonauts, with producer, co-host Chris Pomay and co-host Nick Small. I hope everyone's doing well on this Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. It's been a busy day for me, and I just did a show earlier today with Matthew Scianitti from TSN. So if you're a CFL fan, Argo fan, soccer fan, please check out my show with Matthew Scianitti from TSN. Matthew is one of the best in the business, and he does a great job as a reporter, sideline reporter, host for the CFL coverage and also the sock coverage as well. I'm excited to have Nick on tonight for Episode 8. We're going to break down the Argos' crushing 27-23 loss to Calgary. We're going to talk to Nick about what happened in the first half and what happened in the second half, where the team goes from here. And they have a really short week this week with a game against Calgary again in a rematch Friday night at 7:30 at BMO Field. So I'm going to bring on my co-host Nick Small, and as Nick talks, I'm going to try to fix our Instagram feed here as well, and that's the joys of technology. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to bring on our co-host Nick. Good afternoon, Nick. How you doing?
Hey, Chris. Well, it wasn't exactly the game that we had hoped for. We always find a way to lose in Calgary, even when we think we have it nailed down. So a little disappointing, but we do have one little bit of a good piece of good news that has came out. If you are someone who is living in the Toronto area, you probably have received this bad boy in the mail. This is our season ticket holder gift for the season. Toronto Argonauts football decked out with all the Grey Cup championships, the 18-time Grey Cup champion Argonauts, and it also has all of the emblems through the year. So you can see the one I'm holding here. I have 2 season tickets, so I have 2. So you also see the second one back there in the backdrop for tonight. And yeah, personally, I think we've had a lot of really good gifts over the last couple seasons since MLSE has bought the Toronto Argonauts. And I got to say, this is probably the nicest one yet. I think I like this even better than the rings, if I'm being completely honest. What do you think, Chris?
I actually like it. I like the powder blue color. I like the fact they put the history of their logo, all their 18 Grey Cups on it, and I like the little kicking tee or the little stand for the football. I actually, thumbs up. And between the thumbs up, between the football and hat, I think the Argonauts are getting better with giving away stuff, and I think that was really nice what they did with the season ticket holders this year. And like I said, this hat promotion was a great idea, and hopefully they'll come up with some more ideas for fans coming to the games and the season ticket holders in the future. But I was really liking that again. Nick, just show it up one more time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the one good thing with the delay between announcing that this is what we were getting and actually getting it, you kind of forget about it halfway through the season. So you can see there the original first 3 logos that the club had. Then you got over here, you've got the John Candy era Argonaut Football Club, the A when we switched to the Jason with the shield. And then the most recent 3 logos, you've got the 2005 shield in silver, and then from 2006 to 2020 they switched to blue, and then they've got the current version of the boat logo. And then on the last section they have all the 18 Grey Cups pulled together.
And by the way, Hamilton says they've won 15, but I say they've won 8. So to me, they've only won 8 Grey Cups as the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So speaking of Hamilton Tiger Cats, we might as well bring this up now. Nick, tell us what you're doing with Tiger Cats podcast, and bring this up to him as well, that they only have 8 Grey Cups and not 15.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're doing that logic, we can also count the Toronto Balmy Beachers Grey Cups as ours as well. So we'd have even more than 18 if you go by the city and not the teams. But the big news that I have that I'm excited to announce here is that on Thursday night, I am going to be on the Canadian Football Central YouTube channel with Rick Boccaccio, who was on our show a couple weeks back when we talked about the first Toronto Hamilton game. And then I'm also joining his co-host Carter. So we're going to be doing a bit of a mid-season. It looks like they've been doing a mid-season kind of evaluation of all the teams, doing an episode halfway through. So I'm going to be doing the Toronto Argonauts coverage halfway through, looking at where they are right now and looking ahead at things to come. Of course, it'll be the day before they have this really important rematch against Calgary at home. And especially after dropping the first one in a terrible way, only scoring 1 point and giving up 21 unanswered, they really need to look to bounce back and win the second of this doubleheader.
Well, leads to the first question. What went wrong? I'll say it again.
What went wrong?
What went wrong for the Toronto Argonauts in the second half of that game, 27-23 to Calgary? They played well the first half, but the second half, the offense just was stagnant. And you got to give credit to Calgary. As much as this loss pains us, you got to give them credit because they made second half adjustments. Jake Mayer played better. But when you're up, 16 points going into the fourth quarter, you got to win that. And it just sums up the season, Nick. There's been times where this team looks really good, and then there's times where they play bad. And I guess Bill Parcells said this in the NFL. You are what your record is, and right now the Argos are what their record are, 4-4. There's times they look good, times they don't look good, and unfortunately that fourth quarter did them in, especially.
Yeah, well, when I look at sort of the tale of the two halves, of course, as you mentioned, that Cam Dukes was able to effectively move the ball down the field quite well. I think when it comes down to the second half, it was a combination of things. The defense wasn't terrible. I'll give credit to Payne Logan. I think it was who got the pass interference call. He should probably join the Olympics for diving. Their diving team before the Olympic Games are over, and we'll get a gold medal for sure. I thought that was a little bit of an unfortunate call that really shouldn't have resulted in a penalty even being overturned. But that moment, along with a couple others in the buildup of that drive, allowed the fans to get back engaged in the game, and Calgary built momentum off of it. But like you also mentioned, offensively, the big trouble was the offensive line just completely broke down in that second half. Like there was one scenario where I don't know if they thought they heard a whistle or something, where they thought because someone had jumped that they weren't going to keep playing, and they just let the players walk right into Cameron Dukes. And I think there was another scenario later in the game where McKellar got pushed straight back into Cam Dukes and barely tried or wasn't able to hold him up. So it was a combination of all things that could have gone wrong offensively. And then not to mention injuries start to pile up. First it was Krafala Exume, then it was Isaiah Cage, one of the linemen. Parrish went down, Fraser Sopek, and then the most troubling, I think, at the very end of the game, Janarian Grant looked like he got his clock clean pretty good and was down for a while. So, and I know that was on kind of last return, and the kind of hope that if anybody was going to be able to make something out of nothing, it would have been Janarian Grant. But unfortunately, between that and some really conservative play calling, stepping away from the things that made Cam Dukes look really good in that first half with almost 100 rushing yards.
95 yards, 12 times.
95 total and a touchdown.
On 12 carries as well.
Yeah. just stepping away from that and trying to it kind of resembled more like what they had in the Hamilton game, trying too hard to throw from the pocket, even when the first read's covered and waiting too long. There are some opportunities where you almost had to go into scramble rules and run and choosing not to. And then going back on that as well, like you mentioned as one of your keys coming in, getting Kadeem Carey worked more. Well, they didn't listen to you there clearly because they only gave 8 carries to Kadeem Carey throughout the game. And passing wise, he had 3 receptions on 5
wasn't much of a
targets for 20
factor. It
yards.
wasn't much of
Yeah.
a factor in this game.
Yeah.
And
And early in the game, he did have the ability to run it. He scored one of the touchdowns on the ground.
like I said, this is a tough loss, man, because I would say for, I don't know, 40 minutes of that game, they outplayed Calgary, and then the last 15 minutes. And one of the turning points, Nick, I wanted to ask you, the secondary guy who got called for PI, Sopik, I think. Do you think that changed the whole game right there on that pass interference call against them?
Yeah, I think it was one that gave a whole ton of momentum in the Calgary sales. I know I've heard a couple of people talk about it, and I'm quite in agreement that if it was the opposite scenario, it wasn't called and Calgary challenged. I I don't think it would have been overturned as to being pass interference. To me, it looked more like his feet just got kind of caught. If anything, it probably should have been maybe accidental pass interference. Now that we've seen sort of the precedent set with what constitutes that, but nope, it ended up being full blown pass interference, and that really gave that one deep play was able to give Jake Mara more confidence in being able to throw the ball down the field. And there were a couple of other scenarios where I think Tavares McFadden I think had an opportunity for another interception that he missed, and the things like that just solely defensively allowed things to pile on and allowed Calgary to move down the field more effectively. But I mean, to only score 1 point in the second half, and the 1 point they did score in the third was unintentional by a punt from John Haggerty that went like 85 yards or something stupid like that. Like it with the wind and the high altitude up in Calgary, it it was not a good look offensively. And unfortunately, this whole game kind of epitomized how they've been so far this season. The first couple games, their offense was outstanding and finding ways to march down the field. And in the second half, just completely ground to a halt, playing too conservative, not getting first downs when they need to, and not getting points even when they were starting close to midfield. You only needed 1 or 2 first downs, and you couldn't even get that. So it was very frustrating to watch.
Well, at least Ryan Dinwiddie took responsibility, and he admitted that his play calling wasn't up to par in the second half. And hey, you win as a team, you lose as a team, and unfortunately in football you have to play 60 minutes, especially in the Canadian Football League. I'll tell you this: Calgary's got the best kicker in the league. Rene Paredes, or I can't, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but
Yeah,
to me,
Paradise.
he's the best kicker in the CFL. He's almost Mr. Automatic, and Calgary's 4-4 as well, and they're 4-0 at home, and they've really owned the Argonauts franchise since 2014 now. 16-2 against the Boatmen and 9-1 in the last 10 games. But like I said, that stadium has just been a nightmare for the Argonauts. And you know what? I guess the one good thing about a short week is you put this loss behind you, learn from it, and they got to play Calgary again Friday night at 7:30. I'm now going to go with Cameron Dukes. I don't know. Every time I think Arbuckle's going to start, it's Dukes. So I'm assuming they're going to start Dukes, and we'll see what happens. Nick, I wanted to ask you this. The next question: do the Argos ever consider turning to Brian Scott? You know what you got with Dukes. You know what you have with Arbuckle. Is there any chance that Brian Scott could get in the game against Calgary on Friday
Probably
night?
not. Probably not
Okay.
very likely. I honestly don't seeing it. I think with what you've tried to do to build Cam Duke's confidence up, I think by now we've kind of seen by committee how they've been planning on running this since we knew Chad Kelly wasn't going to play. So I expect that Cameron Dukes is still probably going to start now. If they didn't switch to Arbuckle this week, they're not gonna this game, especially if Dinwiddie's taking it on himself to blame himself for the mistakes. And I mean, like looking at it statistically, like Jake Mayer didn't light up the scoreboard either. He only
No.
had 287 yards, only 1 yard average greater than Cameron Dukes did. He was terrible in the first half, and we saw that with the Boo Birds that came out. And in terms of time of possession, like that one, we kind of see how time of possession has really made a difference in a lot of the Argonauts games. Calgary had the ball for 32 and a half minutes, whereas Toronto only had it for 27 and a bit. So like you have to wonder if Toronto was able to move the ball, just get a couple, 1 or 2 more first downs in that game, especially in the second half, and take that time away from Calgary, that might have been enough to make the difference. And if you're running a clock killing strategy like they did in that second half with really conservative play calling, yeah, you have to figure out how you can still get first downs out of it, and probably not taking your advice and pounding it down the middle was probably a mistake. And then yeah, I give credit to Ryan Dinwiddie for accepting responsibility for it, because it was definitely I think it came down more to play calling than anything else. Even though the O-line was not quite as aggressive as it was in the first half, I think it ultimately comes down to coaching. And I mean, another thing, like you said, if you're going to give Calgary credit, like they did have 6 sacks to Toronto's 0 for that game.
That's huge.
So,
That's
yeah.
huge. I would say the Argos offensive line probably had their worst game of the year on Sunday against Calgary.
Yeah, it was not pretty, and the injury to Isaiah Cage didn't help things either.
How's it look right now, Nick, for Friday night?
To be honest, I haven't heard a lot from the injury depth chart. As we kind of know from talking last week, we did not hear about Winnie McManus's injury and move to the 6-game injury list. And to be honest, I have to give a lot of credit to Royce Metier for stepping up, because I thought, especially in that first half, he was everywhere.
He was great.
Yeah, and I mean, Fraser Sopik looked good until he went down, and aside from that pass interference call, so they still looked fine defensively despite not getting any sacks. They got some good pressure out on on Jake Mayer. I'm just reading the depth chart, so it's kind of throwing my brain out of whack. And yeah, from what I've seen, like the one thing I did see was that Albert Awashe, their fullback, has been released. He was released according to the Argos press account like around this afternoon. So they're now down a fullback, which I'm not too particularly worried about. Awashe a couple weeks ago took a couple really bad penalties for ineffective blocking. So and we've seen historically that Ryan Dinwiddie has not used a fullback very much other than power blocking. And I don't see why you can't, between Kadeem Carey and Daniel Adeboboye, why you can't have them do the blocking instead. So doesn't ultimately come as a huge shock to me. And really my worry is more with how Janarian Grant's doing, because he did not look right after getting off the field near the end of that game with that.
Did he go in concussion? Did he go into concussion protocol?
I'm assuming that's what I don't know exactly if he did, but it sure seemed that way, because he kind of went down and looked like he was holding his head. So, and with concussions, like you never know. He could be fine right now, or he could be a couple weeks, if not more. So with the outstanding season he's had at this point, you're hoping that it's nothing too major.
Okay, let's say he doesn't play Friday. Who steps up in his place, Nick?
Well, you got to think Deontay McMahon will be one of the returners, and then you don't know who it's going to be after that. Probably Daniel Adeboboye would be my guess, but he had a couple of drops when he did do some kick returns a while ago. So you wonder, might they give Makai Polk a chance? Might they give Kevin Mittal a go? Might they try David Ungerer again? Like, those are kind of the names I'm thinking. I don't think they're going to take a page out of somewhere like Hamilton. They're not going to give it to like Royce Metier or something. I think they're too spread thin defensively that you don't really want to give it to a halfback or a safety to try. So you're probably going with McMahon for sure, and then Ungerer or Adeboboye most likely would be my guess.
Besides Royce, who had a great game, I thought Coxie made a great catch, and it was good to see Dukes go deep. and what is it, Coxie or
Coxie. Coxie.
I think he's one of the best receivers in the league. And when you get him the ball and throw it deep to him, 9 times out of 10, he's going to come down with it. So they've got to find a way on Friday night to go deeper and try to get him more involved in it, because he's got great hands, great speed, and he'll go get it 9 times out of 10. And I think that's going to be one of the keys for an Argos win Friday. And it's huge too, Nick, because if they can get the win against Calgary, they'll be 5-4 at the 9-game mark, first half of the season. Chad Kelly will come back. I'm not sure how they're going to market him when he comes back, but I agree with you what you said last week, Nick. If he comes back, plays well, gets touchdowns, I think he'll be cheered by the fans. But the thing is, we talked about this with Matthew Scianitti today on my other show, and he said, yes, Chad can be in shape all he wants, can do all the practicing he wants, but there's a thing called game shape. Game conditioning, being in game shape is different than working out. So it's a lot to put on Chad Kelly to like, hey, Chad, you got to come back. And as soon as you come in, you got to get back to that level that you did. So he's going to have a little bit of rust on him. So the fans have to realize when he does come back, if let's say it's against Saskatchewan on the 22nd, he might not be Mr. Most Outstanding Player that night, because it's going to take him a little time to break it in. And Matthew was saying would be curious to see if Dinwiddie just breaks him in slowly. Obviously, he's not coming back to back up Dukes. He'll be the starter, obviously, Nick. But he's got a little bit of rust on him and game shape. So it's going to be an interesting couple weeks to say, Nick, for the Argonauts with the quarterback.
Yeah, if the way things are shaped up on the schedule, he would be back against Saskatchewan and home during the CNE game. So it would be the kind of game that you probably would want him in, because as we saw in Saskatchewan, it was a very low scoring game, and you don't even know if there's debate whether or not Trevor Harris might come back in the near future. So I think if there's any opportunity that you'd put him in, it probably is a good situation to put him in terms of sort of the matchup side of things. Coxie, unfortunately, he had a couple of drops late in the game, so it was kind of, while I agree that he had that one spectacular catch and was able to move the ball down the field, I didn't have a good look on replays this week. I haven't rewatched the game to really check whether or not it was necessarily him being in a bad position or missing the catch, or Duke didn't throw the ball well. So that kind of thing, I don't have quite as good a perspective on as I normally would. But if you're going to give credit to anybody else who played really well this game, how about you give some credit to John Haggerty? He had some absolutely outstanding punts.
He is one of the best punters in the CFL, and the Argonauts have been blessed with a lot of great punters over the year. But yeah, go ahead, Nick. I agree with you there.
Yeah, fortunately in Calgary, because as I mentioned earlier, you have that higher elevation. He was actually interviewed with Sean Bowen and Mike Hogan before the game on their preview show that they do at BMO Field. And he was telling the story about how his first time there, Jim Barker was expecting him to absolutely blast the ball. And funny enough, he probably had his worst punting performance of his career there, because probably that expectation kind of got to him. But this week he was so calm and collected, and I think his average is the highest of any Toronto punter of all time. I believe that's what I heard Mike Hogan say during the broadcast, 45 yards per average punt, and he was averaging more than 60 yards a punt this week, even into the wind. So his shortest punt was actually with the wind, because he was doing one of those backspin punts to try to get it to bounce like right around the 10-yard line. For the most part, he had them pinned down. And then of course the one he got the rouge off of was the only point they scored in the second half. So and at the time it was actually probably not a bad point to take, because I think by then it extended the Argos lead to 17. So yeah, unless you give up 21 unanswered, like you did, it was that they did. In most situations, that was actually a pretty good scenario to put Calgary in from a strategic standpoint. But you got to follow it up with some first downs, which unfortunately the rest of the team was not able to do.
I'm a big NFL fan as well, CFL, and obviously I like Haggerty. But if he continues to punt like this, Nick, he will start getting interest from NFL teams, and that's part of the business. So, like you said, I want him to continue to kick well for the Argonauts, but eventually he's going to draw interest from an NFL team, and I do feel at some point he's going to get an opportunity to try to make an NFL team down there. By the way,
Yeah,
before
I
we
don't know. It's we've seen it with a lot of other guys. I actually think the punter for Edmonton is an even better punter than Haggerty is, also an Australian,
he's
and
pretty good. He's good. Yeah, I can't
he's
remember his
got
name, but
he's got a better
he's
hang time. But I
yeah.
mean, look at good example, Lerm Haralau. He went down to he was a good kicker when he was still in the CFL with I think it was with Winnipeg, Hamilton, and Toronto, and he went to the NFL and could barely scrape up as a backup for the Dallas Cowboys, and you've seen some of the kicking in the NFL, how abysmal it's been. It's like and you see it with Nathan Rowe want non-Americans to play. So in the end, like having the ratio here in Canada is probably a good thing because it has allowed other people to play in Canada where the NFL chooses they don't want them. They want Americans, even if they suck, compared to
I know.
significantly better Canadian players.
The thing with Nathan Rourke, I know he gets more money being a backup down there, but to me, he's in the prime of his career, and money's important, Nick, as an athlete and a quarterback. But to me, if I was him, I would rather be a starting quarterback in the CFL right now and building his stats, building his career up, than being the number 3 and number 4 guy. I really do hope he makes it in the NFL. I really
Yeah,
do
we all
as a
do.
Canadian. But to me, at some point, it's like, you know what? Come back here, dominate the CFL, get your stats up, and that's how I do it. But I wish Nathan Rourke all the best in the NFL. I think the Atlanta Falcons picked him up. And I forgot to
Oh,
say something before we started the show tonight, Nick. The Argo Bounce live audio show is on weekly on WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, the home of Southern Talk and Sports, weekly from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So I want to say thank you to Ryan O'Neill, their station manager. He loves the CFL content. And the Rod Peterson show is on 12 to 2 weekdays, as well as my other show from 8 to 9 live with CDP Sports Talk. And of course, the Argo Bounce show as well, Nick. Go ahead.
well, if our Georgia listeners want to go out and see him, he's an outstanding quarterback, and fortunately, he's got a long career ahead of him. And if he's still in as a backup or whatever, we saw with Anthony Calvillo and Damon Allen, they can play late in their careers. And if he's avoiding the big blows, the CTE stuff, he could have a very long career post NFL here in Canada. So, but yeah, if you guys want to hear us in how good Nathan Rourke is, bring us. Chris vanished. Well, if you want to see if anybody's here still listening and you want to see how good he is, get us tickets to the game and we'll head over to Atlanta and we'll go and watch them there and prove to you how good he is.
All right, Nick, I'm back. Sorry about that. Hey, this one thing I want to bring up with you, Nick. We're obviously talking about the Argonauts, but you know this and I know this as well. Toronto gets such a bad rep for their attendance numbers, but I've got to talk to you about this tonight, Nick, and I want to bring it up. Any concerns about the attendance around the CFL, especially with the Western teams in 2024 so far?
Not overly concerned yet. I'm not entering panic mode because we are still kind of in the dog days of summer, and I think part of the thing that's adjusting to, which is what the CFL has done, like we kind of talked about, moving to the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the summer is really more than anything a big push because of the new TV contract coming up within the next year. They want to prove that they get some significant TV ratings, especially in this time of year when there's not much else going on. So that's why I think it's had the biggest impact on the decreased attendance, particularly on the Thursday night games and the Sunday night games on long weekends. Yeah, I'm not gonna raise the alarm bells yet. Obviously, it's not great to see some of the places like Calgary's really been not quite what it was because Calgary's not a perennial Grey Cup champ like they had been a decade ago. Saskatchewan, they've had a problem where they've started off the year really well and then haven't been able to clinch a playoff spot. Like we saw that the last 2 years where I think they went 0-6 to close out the season. So until they clinch a playoff spot, and right now we're seeing them on the decline too now as they've lost 2 in a row. So there's that going against their fan base. Winnipeg, there's questions, especially after being abysmal out of the gate. There's questions there. So, I mean, the one good thing is BC's looked really good, and it's reflecting their attendance how well things are shaping up with the Mardome on. And then on the east side, like Hamilton's not looked that great either because the team's been weak out of the gate. Toronto's Toronto, so unfortunately, like all the dedicated, passionate fans are there, but it's still trying to get those out of seeing other events within the city. And then Montreal has looked fantastic since winning the Grey Cup, and Ottawa's looked okay. So I think a lot of it just has to come with the TV deal. And the thing I'll be really interested in seeing is once we get into the second half of the year, we get closer to the playoffs, we have the doubleheader Friday nights, we have more Saturday games. We don't have an afternoon game until the Labor Day Classic between Toronto and Hamilton. You know that game's going to be packed. So I'm not going to sound the alarm bells yet. It's too early to see really how it's impacting league-wide attendance. But if it keeps up like towards the end of the year, and especially as we get close to playoff time, and the playoff teams aren't getting more than, like in Saskatchewan or Calgary, if they're not getting at least 25,000, then you're starting to be a little worried.
This leads to my next question for you, Nick. Do you feel Dave Dickerson outcoached Ryan Dinwiddie in that second half game with the adjustments? And what do you think this Argonaut coaching staff will do on Friday against Calgary in a rematch on a short week?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it came down as Dinwiddie kind of took the blame himself. It was a lot of conservative play calling, unfortunately, in that second half. So that did not look good on them, but I still don't think offensively Jake Mara looked that great, but they were able to build off the momentum that they were able to get from that penalty and build up to it and get more middle of the field passes that they weren't really able to complete in that first half. In terms of where they shape up in the second half, I think they got to encourage Cam Dukes to use his mobility more like he did in that first half of that game, and sort of went away from in the second half.
But he did take a shot. My only concern with Dukes is make sure he slides safely. Like, obviously Dukes has got great mobility in that, but he did take the one shot. It was kind of a late hit. I think it was helmet to helmet. So he's got to be more smart about sliding down earlier, because that you don't need him getting out a major injury and being out for a while either.
Well, they got nothing to lose at this point. Chad Kelly's coming back, so if there's any time you take that, and it worked out because they got a really huge penalty off of it, which
25-yarder
on that
25
drive, yeah.
yarders.
So if there's any time to kind of do that and play arguably a little reckless on the ground game, that's probably it. Because on the passing side, like, you did absolutely nothing, and you were back to the way you looked like in that Hamilton game, unable to move the ball down the field. So, in some points in that game, it might have been better to take a shot down the field earlier on than hanging on to it, I think. And even in times where they did give up the sacks, like Cam Dukes had a lot of time to throw. He had a good 4 to 5 seconds, and if you're not seeing anything, like,
if you don't get rid of the ball,
at that point. Yeah.
If you don't get rid of the football within 2.5 seconds, you can't expect your offensive line to hold up for 6, 7, 8 seconds. So yeah, I still think he has some tunnel vision. I do think Dukes has made progress this year, but Matthew Scianitti said this today too. He goes, for young quarterbacks like Trey Ford and Dukes, they have the talent, but can they do it on a consistent basis? And it's going to be interesting to see what happens Friday night. I'm assuming the Argos are going to go with Dukes, and we'll see.
What Trey Ford's really done, that when you compare it to Cam Dukes, what he's been really able to do. So he's been able to scramble a bit better than Dukes, but the one thing that he's been really able to do well is that he's been able to communicate on the scramble rules. So typically, the basics of scramble rules is that if you're running deep, if you ran a deep route, you cut back in and almost like a really long hook, you run straight back to the quarterback. If you're running a short route, like a 5-yard hook, and you stop there and you stood there for a couple seconds and nobody's there, then you book it and go deep. Trey Ford's been really effective at being able to read that chaos on the delayed play, where there's all kinds of chaos going on in the offensive backfield. He's evaded tackles, and he's been able to throw it deep down the field to that guy who's ran the short route and then now has gone deep with nobody covering him. Cam Dukes hasn't been able to find that, and in some of it, he's staying too long in the pocket to not really see those guys. So that's where I think if you're going to run off that, you can. the other thing I think that they really need to work better on are those pass run options, because there's a lot
RPO.
of times
Yeah.
where he's been handing it off to Kadeem Carey, tucking it in, and nobody's around them. And
The RPO.
Ben Grant's saying the same thing. For once, just tuck it and run, see what happens.
Yeah.
And who knows, you might book it for 15 yards. You might only get the 2 or 3 yards like you were getting with Kadeem Carey anyways, but you've done it. You've been able to pull it off so effectively and so consistently. Now's the time where you, especially in a rematch against the same team, 2 days back to back, you really want to run those, because you know they're going to bite the carrot, and you can sneak out and run that even more effectively. So that's my 2 cents on it. If I was calling it offensively, I'd work on some of that. I'd intentionally work on some of that scramble play to not run at the very end of a post route or something, and to work on having receivers coordinate to come back in, because that's where Trey Ford is looking outstanding, as opposed to Cam Dukes, who's struggling.
By the way, we have a viewer on. I'm not sure if he's from Calgary, but his name is Derek Knight. Derek Knight, thank you for watching our show. Goal stamps, go whoop whoop. And then Derek has another comment here. Dukes moves like Jeff Garcia did back in his day, and that's a nice compliment. And it's just a matter of Dukes just needs to get more reps and more experience. And so I want to say thank you to Derek for watching our show and comparing him to Jeff Garcia. Jeff Garcia had a great career in the CFL and obviously did well in the NFL as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just didn't see enough of it in the second half, which I think because they had, like I said, he had opportunities to run with it. So I think that's where they kind of went away from with their more conservative play calling. And I'm hoping if the same kind of scenario plays itself out in the second half of this back to back, I would like to see a little bit more running from Dukes, and probably more with Kadeem Carey in particular, if they've got one of these kind of 2-3 possession leads.
I forgot to bring this up with Matthew Scianitti today. Obviously, Chad Kelly's 9-game suspension's coming up. If he's done all the training sessions and all the assessments that's necessary, when do you feel Randy Ambrosie, the commissioner, will make an announcement of his reinstatement then? Because even the Argonauts said he needs some time to get in and practice with us, because they do have a bye week, I believe, after this game against Calgary. So
Yep.
I'm just curious to know what his status is going to be. Like, when are they going to make the announcement of Kelly's?
Well, it wouldn't be Randy Ambrosie himself. It would be the board,
Okay.
itself. You just get a CFL statement saying Chad Kelly's been reinstated. The thing we saw, like right back in camp, he could be practicing right now if he wanted to. We saw day 1 of camp, he was there, and there was absolutely nothing in the league restrictions that said he could not practice. From that day on, he could have been in practice every single day, taking reps, even if he wasn't playing. And in part because of the backlash from fans, and probably in part because they knew that their suspension was going to keep him out 9 games, it wouldn't be practical for him to take a ton of reps if he wasn't even going to be allowed to play anyways. So as far as I can see, by the rules that have been laid out up this point, Chad can come and attend practice as much as he wants right now. The challenge is, I think, that the Argonauts are facing on sort of the moral, ethical side of things, is that the Argonauts want to make it clear that the CFL has allowed him to play, so they don't make the first overt move that it's perceived as something that's violating the league policy. Because of that, both sides have been silent on it, and the ambiguity from it. They don't want him to start attending full practice, and the league goes up and says, "Oh no, you can't do that. You're suspended another game." They can, with the way that they've been struggling offensively this season, they cannot afford to play the wrong move at this point and have suddenly someone say, "Oh nope, you can't do that. Your suspension's extended." That's, to my understanding and my belief, that's why it's the case right now.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, before we wrap up the show, we're going to do our normal 3 stars of the game. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to go with DeMonte Coxie. I thought he had a good game. Royce Michier. I had the interception and fumble and 9 tackles. And Cameron Duke's stats weren't that bad. 18 for 27, 177 yards. one touchdown and one interception. The interception was forced at the end of the game because they were in desperation time. So I'm not over worried about that. So you know what? I guess I got to go with Duke's number 3 because he had 177 yards passing. Not great passing numbers, but you add that with the 95 yards on the ground, that's like 260, 270 of offense. So Royce Messier, Coxie, and Cameron Dukes are my Argo 3 stars of the game.
Yeah, I give it significantly more criticism towards the play calling than Cam Duke's play himself. I won't give him a star for it, but yeah, I didn't think Cam this loss I don't think was on Dukes as much as it was on the O line and the offensive play calling as a whole. I will share one. I do think Royce Messier by far was the best defensive player on the field.
Absolutely.
My other star is going to John Haggerty because he was punting fantastic. And
Did
then
his job.
yeah, my third star, I'm a little split, so I'm gonna kind of give them as like 3 and 3B, or you can give them 3 and 4 in any order. I'm not nitpicking. I thought Lirim Haralau did really good, and especially opening the game with that incredible kickoff for the Rouge to start the game. I thought that was awesome. And then the other guy I'll give credit to, with the exception of that PI call, which again I don't believe should have been PI to begin with. I thought Fraser Sopik played really well when he was in there, so I'm gonna give Royce Messier, Fraser Sopik, and John Haggerty my 3 stars.
Good picks as well.
Haralalu.
Good picks, and Liam has been Mr. Reliable. As much as we miss Boris Beatty, Liam has come in, and I think he's only missed 1 field goal a year. I don't think he's even missed an extra. He
He
one
missed an
extra point
at the beginning of the season.
Okay, maybe an extra point and a field goal, but you know what? He's been pretty darn reliable and been pretty good. So no complaints there with him and Haggerty. And I think the Argos did a nice job in finding his replacement. Hey, Nick, before we wrap the show up, got to ask you this question: thoughts on the upcoming short week rematch against Calgary Friday night, and what are some keys to an Argo win over Calgary?
Don't go conservative when you have an 18-point lead. Keep it short and sweet, because I still think this team has every possibility to gain a big lead in the first half against Calgary. We saw it that they were able to move the ball well, and I think they got to play to what made Cam Dukes effective in the first half, and don't go away from it when you have the lead in trying to be more conservative and trying to run the clock out, because unfortunately they didn't get first downs out of it, which allowed Calgary the time to be able to get back into the game and ultimately win it. So like this team could, like we've talked about it a couple times, like this team could be 5 and or 5-2 or 6-1, whatever it is right now. It's just, just in this particular game, it was some tough play calling. So I think stick to what you're doing out of the gate. You didn't need to make too many conservative adjustments. Defensively, I still think they're fine, even without Winnie McManus leading the team at the middle linebacking position.
That's a huge loss. Is there any chance McManus can be in this game Friday night?
They put him on the 6th game, so that's not necessarily means that he won't stay on it the whole time, but yeah, with a hamstring, you really want to give him the full chance to recover. And he had similar injuries 2 years ago. So I think he missed the Grey Cup game because of it, or he was like dressed but didn't play very much at the Grey Cup game. So and that was when he had one of his best years ever. He was going to hands down lead the league in tackles. So it's a tough thing to deal with. So you're hoping that you want to give him the extra rest until he's 100% good to go.
My keys for an Argo win is don't take your foot off the gas pedal. If the Argos get a lead on them, don't let up. Number 2, get that passing aerial attack going. I still don't think they've had one receiver with a 100-yard game this year. Maybe Rashid Bailey the opening game, but really they got to try to get that passing game open, because you're right. If they're just going to run with Dukes or Carey, teams are going to just like stack up the line and say, oh, they're not going to pass. And number 3, I think the D line played okay against Calgary, but they need to get some sacks and pressure on Jake Mayer. If they can sack him a couple times and put some pressure on him, I think the D line will help out the linebackers and secondary. So for me, it's the key is to get a good start and don't take your foot off the gas pedal and open up that passing attack a little more because I think there are plays to be made against Calgary secondary. So, and I think the D line, I feel they're going to have a much better game against Calgary at home than they did on the road, and I feel they're going to get a couple of sacks.
Yeah, so kind of going off that, the one thing that I would like to see, like I kind of mentioned earlier, I like to see a lot more RPO work, especially with Dukes, because he's got this skill set that would really benefit from that compared to someone like Chad Kelly, who's kind of more traditional passing, pocket passing, strong arm. If you're going to look at anything, if any of our viewers, and I know a lot of players have, I don't know if you've looked into it much, Chris, but you should see that college football game that's been out, the college football 25 or whatever that everybody's been talking about. I haven't played it, but I've looked into it quite a bit since it came out, and I think that they've done a fantastic job with putting the RPO type plays in there that college football quarterbacks excel so well with. That's the kind of thing I think the Argonauts need to have a little bit more with Cam Dukes that would really turn what's been proven as one of the best run blocking offenses in the league. It would turn them into a huge powerhouse. It doesn't necessarily have to be like what we see in like Michigan or Alabama or Georgia or something like that. But I think if you can incorporate that away from just the simple swing passes and screens and short hooks and pumps down the middle, I think just those type plays could really kind of spice up your playbook a bit and provide some more opportunities to take advantage, especially like that in a double header where you're facing the same team again. You need just that one little set play, and it's great because once you get the basics down, you can do little things, tweak it, just how you've got your line that you can even do some really crazy stuff that my coach back. Crashed out. All good.
And Nick, it's just your Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Your Wi-Fi.
You can even things like my. Oh.
All right, guys. Apologize.
Okay.
Just a Wi-Fi issue. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
You can even, hopefully I get to this point finally, do like my coach did in junior, where you can do some really crazy stuff. Like you line up your offensive lineman on the left side of center and run stuff out of that. Like just do something different outside the box, because at this point you've gotten to lose. You know Chad Kelly's coming back, and you're going to be back to kind of more of those fundamentals. I think if you're going to spice something up, this would be the week to do it.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Nick, completely. And finally, CFL Week 10 picks. We didn't do too well last week, Nick. I think we both did poorly. We've got Thursday, Saskatchewan and Ottawa. Friday, Calgary, Toronto. Saturday, Hamilton, Montreal. And then Sunday, BC at Edmonton, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers having their bye week.
Well, on Pick'em, I have to admit, I did originally pick Calgary to win, like on the show. I switched the day before when I saw the depth charts picked. I thought Toronto was going to win even without McManus. And yeah, it looked great in the first half. I looked like a genius. And then, I got a lot of mud on my face after that from the Horsies. So, if I'll go first, I'm gonna take Saskatchewan over Ottawa. I'm gonna take Toronto over Calgary in the rematch. I'm gonna take Montreal over Hamilton at home, and I'm going to take BC over Edmonton on the road.
All right, Nick, and I'm going to go with an upset. Ottawa over Saskatchewan. I've got the Argonauts rebounding with a win against Calgary, but I think it's going to be a 24-21 game. I think Liam's going to win it at the end with a last-second field goal, or I can see it going to overtime, but I've got the Argos winning this in a very close game, 24-21. I've been tempted to take Hamilton over Montreal in an upset. My heart says Hamilton, my brain says Montreal. I'm going to go with the Alouettes, especially if Cody Fajardo is going to be starting at home. I think the Alouettes are a much better football club than the Cats. Sorry, Rick, if you're watching that. And then Sunday's game, BC and Edmonton. Okay, BC's 5-3. They have the better record than Edmonton, who's 1-7. But Edmonton is not really a 1-7 team. I really
I
think they should be 4-3 right now. So I'm going to pick the Elks over the Lions Sunday night.
I don't know if you heard, but Caleb Evans, who injured himself late in that game, he's done for the season with
Yeah.
what looked like a pretty bad calf pull. Not not a good thing, and you hate to see it, unfortunately.
They did sign Dominic Davis for the rest of the year, a 1-year contract. But yeah, if Fajardo gets hurt now, they're going to be down to Dominic Davis. So it's going to be important for them to
Well,
keep
no,
Cody
I expect that Alexander guy to still play for them.
play.
So yeah, I don't expect Dominic Davis to suddenly
But
get a whole
but
ton
the,
of reps.
but the Alouettes need Cody Fajardo because their offense is much better with him, and they're more dangerous offensively with him. So to me,
So
go ahead.
well, so was Saskatchewan. You'd say the same with Trevor Harris, but both found ways to win without either quarterback.
True,
So
true, and
that's
Shea.
that's what
That's
CFL is
because
all about.
That's because Shea Patterson is a Michigan Wolverine. They know how to develop quarterbacks. So it's Michigan Wolverines that are helping Saskatchewan win right
But
now.
I think like Toronto, I think it's their D that's keeping them in their game more than necessarily than their quarterback. But we'll agree to disagree, I guess.
Hey, Corey Mason's done a good job, but nobody would have thought they would have started this season 5-3. So Saskatchewan is well ahead of where a lot of people thought they would be, even with the new coach. So you can't really criticize them. Hey, they could easily beat Ottawa on Thursday night, but I just like the way Ottawa's playing right now, and they're at home. So I gotta go with the red black. And you never know. Hey, who knows? Saskatchewan, Calgary, Hamilton, and BC might all win. The CFL, man, it's just, I was talking to Matthew Scianitti about this. I said, the reason we all love the CFL so much, it's unpredictable. It doesn't matter what your record is. Anybody can be beaten on any given day or any weekend.
This year has definitely been more significantly difficult than it has the last couple of seasons to predict games. I'll tell you that much. There's been a lot of poking fun at the predictors for getting it wrong, including ourselves.
I've seen that's true. Absolutely true. And before we wrap up our show, Nick, final thoughts about tonight's show and Friday night's opponent, the Calgary Stampeders.
Yep. All I can say is I'm just going to do the plug-in again. Don't forget to check me out on the Canadian Football Central YouTube show on Thursday, where I'm going to be joining Rick and Cody, I believe, to talk about the Toronto Argonauts, their midway point through the season more broadly, and looking at what's ahead. Of course, the big question is Chad Kelly. Is he gonna like be the Messiah and save the franchise from what's been kind of a season where they've been certainly in the running to win most of these games, but have fallen short in about half of them. Will that be what they need to push them over the top? That'll be kind of the big question I think we'll have coming into that discussion on Thursday. So I'll see you guys then.
And my X factor for Friday night's game, I'm going to go with Devarius Daniels, the wide receiver. I think he's going to have a big game for the Argonauts. And Jared
I hope so.
Brinkman. And do you know what this, before we wrap this show up, what's the latest on Jared Brinkman? You feel he could be back this Friday night?
On the sixth game, probably not likely if I had to guess. Yeah, Devarius Daniels, he was probably the one who struggled the most. He didn't have a single catch on 2 targets.
I
Only
think he'll
targeted
have.
twice.
I think he'll have a big game. And my other X factor is I think the D line and the O line are going to play better. I really do. I think they're both lines are going to have a better game in the rematch at home in Toronto. So
Well,
I've got.
yeah, well, knowing our offensive line coach, he's gonna whip them back into shape. They're gonna hear from him this week, so they're gonna be working like dogs to provide better pass protection.
And where can everybody follow you, Nick, on social
As, al-
media?
as always on Twitter at Nick_small_38.
All right. And you guys can follow me at Christy Pomay. And I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live streamed on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter/X, Instagram, and on all audio major platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, etc. And thank you to everyone listening to the show on WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, the home of Southern Talk and Sports. And finally, my next live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored by Barry Collins Chevrolet, this Thursday night, August 8th, 7 p.m. Special guest, Daniel Sparrow. He is a country music recording artist, up and coming, really talented, and he just released his latest single, Her Favorite Color. And I hope everyone that likes country music or music, tunes into Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show this Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern with Daniel Sparrow. Nick, I want to say thank you so much for coming on again for episode 8. An hour flies by, and like I said, you'll be at the game as a fan on Friday. I'll be doing media work, but hopefully we run into you in the pregame or after the game. And it's going to be a very competitive and interesting game. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if it went to overtime.
I really should bug Chris Beletovich before the Saskatchewan game and see if he's got an extra seat up in the press box for a game.
You know how you can bribe him with crumble cookies. Crumble cookies for Sean Bowen and Chris Beletovich, because they both love them. So that's how you get bribed them if you want to get up there, is with those crumble cookies.
Right on. Okay. Yep. Thanks again, Chris. And thank you to all of our loyal listeners. It's always a pleasure. And as always, go Argos.
Thank you so much, Nick. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you Friday at BMO Field.
You too.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed Season 3, Episode 8 of the Argo Bounce Live audio show, a weekly podcast show devoted to the CFL's 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. Argos Stamps this Friday night, 7:30 kickoff at BMO Field. You can get your tickets at argonauts.ca/single tickets, or you can watch the game on TSN, pregame 7, kickoff 7:30. And if you can't watch on TV, you can listen to the game on radio, TSN 1050, pregame show 7 o'clock with Mike Hogan and Ben Grant. And again, the kickoff is 7:30 against the Calgary Stampeders. So that's about it. Again, I want to say thank you to Matthew Scianitti for coming on my other show today, talking soccer and CFL. And thanks to Nick for coming on our 8th episode tonight as well. The Argo Bounce Live audio show will return next week. Not sure what date and time, and looking forward to it. And hopefully it'll be an Argo win. Again, I see the Boatmen winning this game 24-21 over Calgary, and it should be a very competitive game as well. And I got a comment before we wrap it up. Robbie Schneider, the host of the 716 Sports Blizzard podcast in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Chris, go Argos. Robbie, thank you for watching. Hope you can watch the game Friday night, 7:30 kickoff from BMO Field. And the other CFL action before we wrap up: Thursday, Saskatchewan and Ottawa; Friday, Calgary at Toronto; Saturday, you got Hamilton at Montreal; and Sunday night matchup, BC and Edmonton. Anyways, guys, that's about it. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening to the Argo Bounce Live audio show on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM. And if there's anybody that has a small, medium, large business that's looking to advertise, come check out the Argo Bounce Live audio show with Chris Pomay and Nick Small. You can either DM me or Nick, as we would love to get a sponsor or two to come aboard our weekly show talking about the Toronto Argonauts. And that's about it. And as Nick would say, go Argos. Have a great weekend, everybody, and enjoy the CFL games, and go Argos.
Together fight the foe, scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the Grey Cups won. Go Argos, go, go, go! Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go! Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe. Scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together